Brother, I'm going run a wild Hulk Hogan. If all I get's a moment, I'll make sure it's an explosion. Cause lately I've been seeing stars, trying to kick out on this chokehold. But it's no holds barred, middle fingers like I'm Stone Cold.
What is good, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Slapping Me Wrestling Podcast. I'm WeTooDeep. And before we get going into the episode, you see that QR code right there in that bottom right-hand corner. If you want to get yourself maybe this NXT title, maybe this Universal title, maybe the new title, maybe the new tag team titles. Maybe you ain't got money to spend on titles. Maybe you want CM Punk's shirt or Trick Willy's new shirt or Mommy. Or the point is, go to that QR code in the corner of the screen. Use our link. Support the podcast, as that'll take you to the WWE shop. Every sale that goes through that link, we get a commission for it. So that's where that's your stop. That's the link you need to use. Support get your fresh merch while supporting your favorite wrestling podcast. Now that business is done, this is about to be awkward holding these two belts. Make me look like Cody Rhodes over here as I get rid of them. Let's transition. There we go. Let's transition into the actual show. But for real, thank y'all, everyone who has used the link or will use the link. Again, it's right down there in the corner. Link will also be in the description. If you're listening on podcast networks, you probably don't know what I'm even talking about right now. Go watch it on YouTube. You could see it. Maybe I'll clip it. We'll see. But if you're watching on podcast networks, hit that follow or subscribe button. That way, whenever a new episode is posted, you can turn on your notifications. You can get that alert that a new episode has been posted. If you're on also on podcast networks, leave us a review. Tell us how you think we're doing. If you hate it, it's fine. Tell us you hate it. If you love it, let us know. We want to know that you like it as well. And if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Leave us some comments in the comment section. Hit the thumbs up button. If you don't like it, it's okay to hit the thumbs down button, but do me a favor and hit it twice. Let us know that you really hate. But I appreciate everyone who supports us and listens to the show. Finally, if you want to send comments any other way, you don't want to, you can message WeTooDeep at junkyardmediagroup.com. That's WeTooDeep at junkyardmediagroup.com, which reminds me, go to junkyardmediagroup.com. There's blogs. There's, you can get the Beyond the Junkyard podcast, which is live every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time with Junkyard James and Cody. Again, that's junkyardmediagroup.com. You can also find the link at that website to our Discord. I think the Discord link is also in the description of the video. But either way, join the Discord. It's where the conversation really happens, right? If you really want to get into the conversation of the episode or of wrestling in general, we do watch alongs. We're like, we're talking about the show as it's going on. There's debates all the time there about different things. And definitely a fun place to be. You can ask questions there. You can, respond to different parts of the episode there. And that's where a lot of the stuff is centered, again, on the Discord link in the description. But now that all of that fun jazz is out of the way, let's get down to business. So on Tuesday, I had initially told everybody, and I think I even put this in the Discord as well, that this episode was going to be specifically around AEW, that I was going to dedicate this entire episode to AEW. And I just got to let y'all know, plans have changed. In fact, they changed about 20 minutes before I clicked record here, because I sat down and actually watched NXT from Tuesday. And so what ends up happening is I have this idea, and I think this will be a good idea. As you could tell by the name of the episode, we're going to do a comparison between AEW and NXT. I'm not going to compare all of WWE to AEW because I really think it's fair to say. I think this is fair to say. Now, I've always been a realist with this. I'm probably the only person that considers NXT a third brand rather than developmental. However, it's the third brand. However, I think it's very safe to say NXT and AEW are more comparable than AEW and Raw or SmackDown. That's why I believe the war was always NXT versus AEW. Because I don't think the fans that watch Raw and SmackDown, outside of, you take your fans that watch everything, you take them out. You take people like me who watch NXT and watch Raw and watch SmackDown and occasionally will watch Dynamite. You take even me in that spectrum of casualness, right? You take all of those out and you probably get 6 to 7, maybe 800,000 people. And then you have your more casual fans who like Raw and SmackDown who tune in, that make up the rest of the audience, the other 800,000 to a million people, right? And so I think it's more fair. It's always the comparison had to be NXT to AEW. And so both just came off of bigger events, with NXT with Spring Break in week 1 and AEW with Dynamite on last Sunday. And so I think what I want to do is compare the product. But in doing so, it's not going to be like, well, I'm going to compare the product by reviewing both of those shows. By reviewing Dynasty and last week's Dynamite as well. We're going to talk about that as well from Wednesday. And reviewing Spring Break-In and reviewing the state of both brands and reviewing and comparing the two shows, the two brands. Right? So this is a comparison of brands. And I want to start with AEW. So let's talk about Dynasty. Let's talk about AEW Dynasty for a minute. So I'll be completely honest with you. I wasn't paying attention to this entire event. But it was on. I watched part of it. I knew there were going to be certain matches that I would be more interested in. And so we'll start with I didn't pay any attention to the pre-show, so I'm not even going to grade that. Right? But we get on to the main card, and I think that's the one that starts with Okada and Pac. Now, Okada and Pac, I didn't pay attention to. And then the second match of Copeland, Kingston, and Mark Briscoe versus House of Black, I didn't pay attention to it. So I don't think it's fair for me to grade those matches because I wasn't watching them. I wasn't paying attention to them. I really start paying attention to the show, and I think at this time, if I remember correctly, I was watching something different. I think it was playoff hockey, but I don't remember. And so I really start paying attention around the TBS championship match. It's Willow versus Julia. Willow ends up winning the match, which I think is the right decision. But it's leading to this story with Mercedes Moné. And so let me sort of tell you how I knew Willow was winning this match, because I understand the greater arc of what they're telling. I'm not going to call it a story yet because they really haven't. And I'll explain what I mean by story when we talk about NXT. But the greater arc that I think they're going on, the greater plot line has always been Mercedes is back. She's sort of teaming and helping Willow, but it's meant to turn on Willow eventually, right? So Mercedes is going to go against no other than Willow Nightingale, right? Again, for this TBS champion, right? Well, this makes complete sense. Like, it wasn't the best match, but so when I say wrestling is predictable, wrestling is supposed to be predictable. Wrestling, if done correctly, is supposed to you're supposed to be able to get to the point before they get there, right? You should be able to figure things out, right? Everyone who wants wrestling to be one of these things where, like, I don't know who's going to win. Y'all are in some different stratosphere of fandom than I will ever be on, right? Wrestling is supposed to be predictable. It's supposed to be, the way the story is leading and everything, right? So, for example, if you're reading a book, a good author of a novel will trickle along breadcrumbs and you should be able to pick up on what is happening so that by the time you get to the climax of the story, you know what that big moment's going to be. Now you're just building the anticipation to get there, right? And so this was pretty obvious who was winning this match. That someone who literally was watching the show with maybe had watched 2 episodes of Dynamite prior to this, right? But anyone who sort of understands just the basics of wrestling can tune on any wrestling show, and if they're doing their job and telling you stories, or at least giving you plot points, you can sort of figure out where things are going, right? Wrestling is supposed to be predictable. That's not a critique. Oh, well, this show is too predictable. Good. That means they're doing their job. Now, with that being said, like 2018, 2019 WWE was predictable, but the product sucked. And so that's the critique that hey, yeah, it's predictable. That's not the good critique. The good critique of 2018, 2019 WWE is this whole show sucks. And it's predictable because it sucks. Predictability is a good thing. Bad product is not. So, right. So I think we need to, recognize the difference there. Then we have Roddy Strong versus Kyle O'Reilly. And I'm going to be honest, I completely did not care about this match. And this is what I mean by, like, you in order for this match to mean something, you have to at least, like, fill me in. I don't really think they did much of filling in on stories. Probably because there wasn't a story to be told. That I could pick up on, right? And so, I'm not going to judge this match, right? I don't think it's fair. We have now the FTW Championship, Hook versus Jericho. And I did watch this. And I'm just like most of the rest of the wrestling universe, really confused on why you have Chris Jericho win this matchup. Like what is the point of having Chris Jericho win this title that's not even like, it's not necessarily like a main title. It's like under the undercard. But the guy who had it prior to Jericho, Hook, he's like a potential free agent in several months. already said that he was going to, right? And so storyline wise, it makes zero sense. But this is where you have to understand the backside of the business, that we already are privy to this type of information where, Hooks basically told Tony Khan he's going to test free agency. And I'm not going to say 100% certain, but I'm about 90% certain that Hook is coming to Orlando and he's coming to NXT. I think that's the move for him. I think what Hook recognized is that he's not in the in crowd. He's not going to get that big push that I think he should have. And there isn't a system for him to develop, because I think there needs to be some development for Hook. And what I think and what I hope people in the wrestling world are understanding, these younger people who are just getting into the business, maybe they've been trained, but they need a lot of work. Maybe they need some in-ring experience and development of their skill set. That AEW is not going to do that. AEW has no intention of building the next generation of stars. You can tell by who's the top of the brand. It's already established people. They have zero intention of building the next generation of superstars. And if they were, they would have a performance center where you could send someone like Hook to work with veterans off TV and to develop his craft. Where you could have sent someone like Jade Cargill prior to her leaving. But when you lose someone like Jade, you lose someone potentially like Hook. And then I don't know if y'all paid attention to Dynamite, but Big Bill came out, and this sort of plays along to the story, because Big Bill came out and told Chris Jericho, I want to sit under your learning tree, or whatever stupid shit they're doing. But Big Bill was just in a tag team with Ricky Starks, but Ricky Starks is nowhere to be found. So was Ricky Starks considering, hey, I'm just going to ride this contract out and I'm gone too? AEW has zero zero initiative to want to build the next generation. You could tell by who they make their big stars. They want the established superstar. They don't want to put in the work to build the next generation, but there's a brand that is putting in that work, and it's NXT. And I hope these younger superstars that are just getting into wrestling school and are just learning and just doing their first indie matches, that you realize that, hey, you may be really good, right? But look at someone like 19-year-old. I know he was Jay Malachi. I don't remember his name on NXT right now. It slipped my mind. But his indie name was Jay Malachi. Big in DPW, Dead Pro Wrestling, or I think it's what it's called. I don't remember. DPW is what I know it as, and they've run some shows in this area. But he's 19. He's good, right? To get on the WWE radar, you have to be good. But he needs there needs to be some sort of development of that skill set, right? And I'm certain AEW probably reached out to him. But I hope people follow in his footsteps and understand that developing the skill sets you already have and making it round and the best that you could be, that's only going to happen at WWE. AEW will take your skill set and will exploit it, but they're not going to help you develop it. They'll use what you already have, but they're not going to let you build and grow and become better, right? Especially if you're not in that inner circle of friends. Let's just be completely honest with you, right? But back to Dynamite, like what? This reeks of backstage politics, and well, Hook's leaving. Well, let's just sort of have him lose to Jericho on the way out, right? Yeah, it is what it is. You have Thunder Rosa versus Toni Storm. I watched it, but there's nothing memorable here for me. So again, not really going to spend a lot of time on it. And we're going to skip this. Nah, we won't skip that for right. So then we sort of set up the big 3 matches to end the night, right? And that starts with Bryan Danielson versus Will Ospreay. And at the time, I said that this may be match of the year. Now, that in the WWE circle, like the WWE fan base that watches this, that may not watch AEW, who may think I'm over exaggerating this. I'm not. This is going to probably be the match of the year. For Dave Meltzer, definitely going to be match of the year. For Wrestling Observer, which is Meltzer, for Brian Alvarez, for PWI, for all of the sort of wrestling media, but this is probably going to be match of the year. But also for me, as a casual fan, this is going to be match of the year. And I know a lot of people in this casual circle, like, but we just saw Roman and Cody, and the moment means more. There's the key word. Ospreay versus Danielson is going to be match of the year. Cody versus Roman is going to be moment of the year. They're 2 separate things. 2 separate things. Roman versus Cody will be more memorable. And this is actually something I tweeted. Where if I had to pick one of the matches between those 2, I would pick Cody versus Roman because it's more memorable. There's a story behind it. The story for Ospreay versus Danielson is Ospreay thinks he's the best wrestler in the world, so he has to beat, who other people would consider like the best wrestler of the past generation. Right? And so that's not really a story that would produce memories, right? There's a story there. It's not a good one, but there is one. It's very, it's very rudimentary. It's very, just above sea level. It's not going to produce anything memorable, but I guess you can call it a story. But was it a banger of them? Absolutely. One of the best matches I've seen in quite a while. I was glued to the screen and I sat there and I was like, if you did this, but expanded the story behind it, Tony, I'd watch. Like, quite honestly, I would watch week after week after week if you put on that, right? But it's this style of match. And see, then I have this other thought. But what makes this any different than any other Will Ospreay match? There's nothing different. Will Ospreay is great. Will Ospreay is great. I said last year he's top 3. I've even said at some point this year, in the last couple of weeks, that I thought Will Ospreay may be the best wrestler in the world. That opinion changed after watching this week's episode of NXT. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Ospreay to me is number 2 in the world right now. We'll go ahead and mention it. Dragunov is number 1, and we'll explain why in a minute. But Will Ospreay puts on the same match on Dynamite that he does on the pay-per-view. And so it doesn't make it important, doesn't make it special. This is why I've always said that the wrestling has to take place on the pay-per-view. And if you just did promo work or sort of shells of the pay-per-view. So like if Ospreay wants to wrestle, don't have him put on the same performance on Dynamite that he's going to wrestle at the pay-per-view, because it doesn't make the pay-per-view match special. Right? So this match was great. It's going to be match of the year, without a doubt. The media will push this. The wrestling media will push this to be match of the year. And I might even, when we get to the end of this year, say, yeah, that's match of the year. But it's not memorable. There's no memory that was made outside of, Ospreay getting this win. But then you end it with a very serious situation. And I know it's a sort of storyline, but we got to stop with this. We got to stop. Bryan Danielson does this like in every single match he does, where he does this sort of like overselling of his neck injury. And as someone who was a Daniel Bryan fan in 2014, when I got back into wrestling around Royal Rumble of 2014, Daniel Bryan was my favorite wrestler. And I was behind that story leading up to that year's WrestleMania at WrestleMania 30, 100%. Right. And then he wins the title. And it was one of the greatest memories that I can think of in wrestling, right? It made me really fall in love with what wrestling was. And he goes on, and then he has like 2 neck injuries and concussion problems in the years following, and then he has to retire. Like, that was one of the, how everyone has that sort of Edge moment where Edge retired, and everyone who was an Edge fan at the time got really emotional, and it's still emotional to people. Like, Daniel Bryan having to retire at that time was my Edge moment. But I wasn't watching the product when Edge had to retire. Right. But so this Daniel Bryan thing and everything with like Connor's cure and everything like that, that's an emotional time as a wrestling fan, right? If you were a fan of Daniel Bryan, right? And then he comes back and he does this good, right? And now he comes to AEW, and it's almost like they want to break his neck again. And as someone who has these sort of like memories of like having him retire because of these neck injuries, every time I see him in the ring, that's the first thing I remember. Is this dude should not be doing this shit that they do to his neck. I don't care how safe Ospreay is. I don't care how safe Ospreay is in the ring. Daniel Bryan should not be getting dropped on his neck. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel about this. And for him to oversell a neck injury, did it do what it was supposed to do? Fine. Cool. But I just don't think one of these times that's not going to be fake. And I don't know. I'm just not big on this angle. I'm just not. I'm not big on this angle at all. And so that, to me, that sort of tainted how good the match was. Right. But then we move on and we have the Young Bucks versus FTR, and the Young Bucks win like we knew they were going to do. And Jack Perry came out like we knew it was going to be. Like, predictability, like I said, is a good thing. Predictability is a good thing. We knew this was going to happen. When the fan came out and pushed the ladder over and then was revealed as Jack Perry, guys, this was like, everyone knew this was going to happen. If you did not figure this was going to happen, you haven't been paying attention. And I haven't been paying attention to AEW, but I could tell you that this was going to happen. I could have told you this. Right? And so then we get our main event. And again, the main event it wasn't a good match, in my opinion. Right? It was an okay match. We get Swerve as champion. Right? But it was what it was. It was what it was. There wasn't any memorable storyline behind Swerve and Joe really fighting. I thought the show was good. It was a decent pay-per-view. And this is where AEW really does a really good job, is putting on great pay-per-view at shows, right? My problem comes in with Dynamite. And you're coming off of this pay-per-view, and you don't have anything expand towards the next one. Double or Nothing in May, where you need to start building plot points now. You can't wait till 2 weeks before the show to start fast tracking the story. So you start the show with Swerve, and he's wrestling Kyle Fletcher. And I know that the story sort of, you're building Don Callis and the separation of Kyle Fletcher and Ospreay from Don Callis, but You have Swerve, your newly crowned AEW champion. He's starting the show, and he's wrestling a dude who is ROH TV champion, which, by the way, no one knows because, understand this. You have new eyes on the product. You have new eyes on the product with Swerve Strickland being champion. You have new eyes on the product. It's just the way that it was. And instead of him coming out and having this big grand celebration, he has to fight a dude who this person, who these new eyes don't know. They don't know what an ROH is. They're probably checking Twitter to figure out who this is. And what they're seeing is this dude is 0-7 on AEW this year. And they're thinking, why is my champion fighting in a match where if he loses, he then has to face him again for the title? Why is Kyle Fletcher anywhere near this situation? You could separate the Callis family some way else. You don't put Kyle Fletcher, who's 0-7, near your newly crowned champion. You could have Samoa Joe come out and challenge for a rematch. You could have someone like Ospreay. Like, if you wanted to split the Callis family, and I know you're trying to save Swerve and Ospreay for London. I know that's the plan. But you could have had Ospreay in this, right? You could have had Ospreay in this feud or in this match. You could have had Samoa Joe. You could have had, Hangman Page come out and challenge continue that feud. You could have put one of your established stars, is what I'm trying to say. But instead, you put the guy who's 0-7 this year on AEW television. And you want us to care about it? And quite honestly, Swerve shouldn't be wrestling. Swerve should start the show. He should get the big celebration. But then it comes out after the show that the reason that this is happening is because they're going to do it on Collision, where even less people watch. Because they're going to get the big lead in from the Celtics Heat game. And the Celtics Heat are going to end. And there's going to be fans watching. And Swerve Strickland's going to enter. And they think that this is going to equal some sort of big ratings boom. I promise you it's not. I promise you it's not. That's dumb, dude. That's dumb booking. It's dumb booking. It's really dumb. But let's continue. I don't remember a lot of Dynamite. I watched the whole thing. I don't remember a lot of Dynamite. I remember how I felt about Swerve wrestling to start the show. I don't quite remember anything else until the ending of the show, where Jack Perry comes out. Basically, they bring out Tony Khan as well, his dork self. Wow. Actually, I do remember one other thing. Before this segment, your sort of main event match of the evening is the New Japan Championship. Whatever John Moxley's title is. I don't know what it is. And he's fighting. He's challenging. He's defending the New Japan Championship on AEW television against Powerhouse Hobbs. So here's what's happening. The Callis family gets more viewership with 2 losses than Swerve got. You put the Callis family on TV longer than your AEW champion. You defended another company's championship in your main event and did nothing with your world champion. Guys, I'm sorry to tell you this. Is this historical? Sure. Now, I personally hate this. I hate this thing in wrestling where we do now, where it's like, oh, he's the first black champion. I'm going to say this, and it's probably going to be offensive to some. Who gives a fuck? Or like how NXT, even with NXT, this is the first women's battleground match. Who cares? I'm not watching the product, and I don't pick favorites based on if they're a woman or what skin color they are. And I understand representation is important, but guys, how much like I get it. I understand the whole representation argument. But why does that matter so much? Could someone fill me in? Like I'm trying to. Why does that matter so much to people? I don't understand it. It's not something that's ever been important or that I've ever thought should be important. If you only like Swerve Strickland because he's black, I think that's a problem. It overlooks his skill set. If I were to come in and say I only am going to like white superstars, that's a problem. Because it overlooks the skill set, not just of everyone else that I said I'm not going to like, but it overlooks the skill set of the particular wrestlers that I do like because I only like them because they're white. And so I don't understand why we have this fixation on some sort of history of like, oh, they put this right. But let's just say this did matter. Guys, he's a transitional champion. They're not treating him the way that Swerve should be treated. Because you know what's going to happen, right? When MJF was champion, it was featured in the main event. When Will Ospreay eventually, which is going to happen in London, Will Ospreay will beat Swerve for this title. They're going to treat this like a main event title. But in the meantime, between, what's going to happen with Swerve? They've already proven New Japan's going to be the main event. Right? New Japan's going to be the main event with John Mox. Swerve's not the top dog in the company. They just wanted to check off the representation box. And to me, that's not a reason to make someone champion. That's just how I feel about it. Right? This almost to me feels like, let's just check off this box. And then we can, in 20 years, we can claim, we got a black champion quicker than WWE did. Right? This has nothing to be like, right? Because let's just understand this. Like, most of my favorite wrestlers today, Trick Williams, Carmelo. My favorite tag team that I cheer for in NXT is Idris Enofe and Malik Blade, because I think they're the best tag team in NXT right now, and I think that they're underrepresented. They're not given the opportunities they should because of whatever reason. You know, Axiom and Fraser have a little bit better chemistry. I don't know the reason why Shawn Michaels isn't putting Enofe and Blade in this situation. I think they're heavily over. But we've had this like movement in the last week where like, look at this, we've had, 3 black champions. Like, is that why you're watching wrestling? Are we not like, when I sit here and I see, and we'll talk about NXT in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and just, I guess, if you haven't watched it, spoil it. When I sit here and watch Trick Williams get crowned NXT champion, my thought is not congratulations. This is cool for African Americans. My mindset when I'm watching that is this was a good story, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I don't understand why we have to play this sort of tribal game where right, because and theoretically, let's just play this. I'm Irish. I don't get happy when Irish people win champions. I don't sit here and be like, oh, Becky Lynch is my idol because she's Irish. I don't give a fuck. I don't like Becky Lynch because she's Irish. I like Becky Lynch because her stories and the characters and the way she's been presented that's why I like Becky Lynch. It has nothing to do with the fact that she's Irish. Just play it along. I'm German. I don't like Dragunov because I'm German. I don't like Gunther because I'm German. Nah. Right? So I don't understand. It doesn't connect with me why we have to sort of like make this type of connection. Like, the first ever this, or I watch for stories, and I don't care who's playing the characters in the story. I don't care. I don't. So I don't get this argument of why this is an important thing, right? Especially when you look at it and you realize, Swerve Strickland, he's transitional. He's only there to get them to Osprey, and they're not even going to treat him like a world champion. They've already proven that in the first episode, right? So I don't know. That's my soapbox on that story, right? But the last thing that I remember is Tony Khan coming on screen on Dynamite, breaking a promise he made in 2020 where he quote, "I will not be an on-screen character." So he doesn't know how to keep that. 4 years later, I guess he changed his mind. And this dude wants to be Vince McMahon so bad. Like, you could tell, like, this whole gimmick is a ripoff of, like, of different inspirations. This is like NWO meets Steve Austin and Vince McMahon storyline. Like, they're ripping off a lot of these different things, and it's pretty cool. Like I'll be honest with you, this is the most I've cared about the Young Bucks ever. But this also seems to be the only story they actually want to tell. And when I mean story, what I mean by is not just story in the ring, because there's two types of stories in wrestling. We know this. There's the story leading to the match, and then there's the story of the match. If all you do is tell me the story of the match, and you don't give me the story that leads to why the match is happening, you're not telling stories. You're giving plot points. Right? So the only story they're really telling is this Jack Perry story, this Young Buck story. Nothing outside of it is really doing anything other than giving me plot points to multiple different stories. But nothing's being built. Nothing's being tied together to build a cohesive, consistent storyline. Right? So that's AEW. There's no logic involved in a lot of these stories either, right? There's no logic involved in a lot of these stories. And so we'll get to this point. The falling stock in the WeTooDeep stock market is Tony Khan's booking. It's the only thing there. It's Tony Khan's booking. Because there's no logic involved in anything. Swerve just won the title, and he has to face 0-7 Kyle Fletcher. Makes zero sense in a logical way to book a show. 0 sense. Right? You have Willow come out and and there's a story here kind of with Willow and Mercedes, and I guess that's fine, and I guess Chris Statlander is going to turn, but like who really cares about, because there's really nothing being done here outside of just setting up a match, but you're not really building me a reason as to why I should care about the match. Right? The only thing you're really doing is building the Elite versus whatever Tony Khan's little subgroup is going to be, that I'm assuming is going to be led by Kenny Omega. Right? Can we just talk about, and this thought came to me the other day, where they called this like the new Elite. And I sat here and I thought about it. I was like, okay, so what was the original like Elite? It was Omega, it was Hangman, it was the Young Bucks, and it was Cody. Now, what's a distinct thing about Cody? Oh, blonde hair. Who? New Elite blonde. Okada. Okada's just the replacement for Cody Rhodes. they feel that they could put Okada in Cody, and it's not working. It's obviously not working. Anytime Okada comes on the screen, people tune out. And we have proof of that. Like, you go back and watch the trend line and watch the viewership of Okada matches, and that's typically the lowest viewed point of the show. Tony Khan's booking makes zero sense, even when they're trying to tell this story. But then let's talk about Tony Khan. Bro takes a kidney punch and die. Like if you're gonna put him on screen, can you first off teach him how to not look like a dork? But when he takes a bump, when he takes the punch to the kidney, like, he dies from it. Like, he drops to the ground and dies. And then he realizes, oh shit, I gotta actually sell this. I didn't get shot. I took a punch to the kidney. And then he starts selling it. And then they lift him up and they Meltzer driver him. And then Daddy Shad comes out asking for the money or whatever he showed up for. Tony, where's my money? That the shit you're spending my money on? Like, can you imagine being Shad Khan? Like honestly, Shad Khan makes his TV debut. He's the guy who's on here he's the financer. Like, Tony's not paying for this shit. Daddy's paying for it. Right? And he comes on screen for the first time. And it's the lowest rated Dynamite of all time at 636,000 viewers. And I know the excuse is going to be something about the West Coast. I don't think the West Coast was watching live or something. I don't know. Or the excuse is going to be like, well, the playoffs are on, basketball and hockey, so we got to expect the rating. Guys, the point of the matter is you thought you did something, but you scored the lowest rating you've ever had. And Shad walks out live in a stadium in person to 2,000 people in Daly's place, where the rumor is they had to put crowd fillers in there. Indie wrestlers were giving out free tickets. Lindsay Snow, which is a very good indie wrestler, by the way. I've seen her multiple times. She tweeted, but then quickly deleted that she had 50 free tickets to AEW for both Collision and Dynamite. They're giving out free seats, right? So if you're Shad and you're there live and you're walking out and it's a 2,000 seat arena, 2,000 people, you get back, you're watching the TV numbers and they're not looking good. And you just see your son take a pile driver on live TV. How do you not sit there and be like, what the fuck am I paying for? Right? And I know all the fans are like, kayfabe's alive. So this is the first thing that's on the rising stock of the WeTooDeep stock market. Kayfabe appears to be alive again because Tony Khan then shows up last night to the NFL draft wearing a damn neck brace at an NFL event that actually means shit to other people. You put it on TV in front of millions upon millions of people, and I understand that the idea behind this is how we're going to build the audience. But I can just tell you, as a wrestling fan, like as a wrestling fan, I'm conflicted, right, in my opinion of this, because number one, I'm kind of happy to see him play this off, because had he not played this off, then it would have been a stupid angle and it ruins the credibility of your product, right? But at the same time, because you pulled it off, bro, there is no way I'm taking the front office of the Jacksonville Jaguars seriously because they have a man-child wearing a neck brace because he took a pile driver on a wrestling show, right? So either way, you lose. I take your wrestling product seriously, and But dog, I just know it. Like Doug Peterson's sitting 3 seats down from Tony Khan. Dude just looks like, what the fuck is happening right now? Like why? Like if any any NFL fan that was watching and they show the war room and there's a dude in a fucking neck brace, and then you have, at least on NFL Network, you have a dude who runs the 40. You can't think of his name right now. Basically explain that Tony Khan's wearing this neck brace because he took a pile driver on his wrestling show last night. I can't even imagine fans who don't know what's going on when that pops up, because Twitter was mostly filled of wrestling fans talking about, oh, I'm going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar fan now. But I can't imagine like true fans of just football just seeing that and laughing their ass off at how dumb Tony Khan looked. Yeah, as the wrestling fan in me was happy he kept kayfabe alive. But here's my argument. Here's my question and my argument for why this doesn't really matter. Because everywhere else in the industry, kayfabe is dead. And there's this want in the wrestling world to keep kayfabe alive, but there's also this, like, we also want real story. Like, we also want kayfabe, right? And so you can't just flip the switch on kayfabe and turn it on when it's convenient for you and turn it off when you no longer want it. It's either dead or it's alive. And the argument for the last 10 years, anytime someone tries to bring up anything about kayfabe, is, well, kayfabe's dead. But kayfabe's now alive because Tony Khan wears a neck brace at the NFL draft, right? And so I don't know, man. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to feel about this, because like I think it's funny, and I'm happy he did it because that means he values his wrestling product. But at the same time, as a football fan, if I was a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, I'd probably be submitting my application to join a new fan base, because I wouldn't be able to put up with that clown show where my GM shows up wearing a neck brace because, or not GM, but my owner shows up, the owner of the damn team. Dude makes business decisions. He runs football operations. And he's over here telling stories with his wrestling toy box. And he doesn't have time for football. That's part of the reason. My favorite quarterback in the league is Trevor Lawrence. But I can't be a Jacksonville fan because of Tony Khan. Because I understand that Fulham just got dumped on by Liverpool, and Tony Khan does absolutely nothing to make that team better. Because I sit here and I see the Jacksonville Jaguars who have a generational talent. Trevor Lawrence as a quarterback in high school at 18 years old was said by a lot of college and NFL scouts that Trevor Lawrence at 18 could skip college football and play and be pro. If that was legal, that they believe Trevor Lawrence could do that, because Trevor Lawrence was that good in high school. He was that good in college. He gets to the pros and he gets to a franchise in Jacksonville run by the Khans. And he gets a year ripped out of his career because they hire Urban Meyer, and then they don't put weapons around him. They have Calvin Ridley, but then they don't re-sign him. They overpay for Christian Kirk, right? They don't put weapons around Trevor Lawrence. They've turned a generational quarterback to a very serviceable starter. But no one's talking about Trevor Lawrence winning MVPs anytime soon. right? So if I'm like I understand who Tony Khan is. He's a wrestling mark, but he wants his hand in other toy boxes as well, mostly because he has the money to do so. But he doesn't care about his soccer team because he's at WrestleCon when transfer period is. And he doesn't, I can tell you, he doesn't actually care about the football team because the stadium gets cited for a rat infestation in the food areas. They're not updating the facility so that team mother, like the wives of the players don't have to nurse in public spaces. They're not getting a good circumstance for the players' families. You're not putting on a good product for your football fans because you're a very mid team at best. And you're not helping a generational player. You're actually hurting a generational player. No one's talking about Jacksonville winning Super Bowls anytime soon. But this dude really cares about his his wrestling promotion, about AEW, to the point where he's telling stories at the NFL draft. And wrestling fans love it, but man, the football fan in me, I cringed when I saw that. Like, I laughed because I'm like, oh, he actually did it. But then I cringed, like, holy shit, he actually did it. So we got to make a decision, wrestling fans. Is kayfabe alive? And if so, we have to apply that to everything in wrestling, which means, guess what? I don't want to see pictures of Liv Morgan hanging out with baby faces anymore. I don't want to see, pictures of, Damian Priest hanging out with Cody Rhodes because they're bitter enemies. I don't want to see pictures of CM Punk hanging out with, the heels. Or is kayfabe only alive when it benefits what you want? That's my thing here. Right? We got to be consistent in how we apply. Kayfabe can't just be a switch you turn on and off. Right? So now let's compare AEW to Spring Break-In, which is always one of my favorite. Like, these like special NXTs like this, they always overperform what they should be. So we start the show, and guys, let me just tell you, the way they built this show, this is how you build a show. You have a centerpiece that now what's the centerpiece? Well, it's the main event. It's Trick versus Dragunov. And they bring in alumnus of NXT, the Creeds, shit, what the fuck is it? New Catch Republic. Theory and Waller are on a video. Gargano comes in. Damian shows up, right? So you're building the importance of this match over the night with an already developed story that Trick Williams was 0-3. He can't beat Dragunov. And if he loses, he's gone from NXT. So you have the story that leads up to the match, but then you have the story in the match. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But first, so you start this show with a recap of leading that up to what's leading up. And then you go to the ring. And I kind of actually liked this shot. It was weird because the wrestling fan in me is really having to adapt to the changes Triple H is doing, because for the longest period of time, the belief in the fandom was if your entrance was not shown on TV, that they didn't see you as important. That was sort of the Vince McMahon way, right? So a lot of times you would always, like, as they're going to commercial, they would, like, let's just say, for example, it was John Cena versus, Justin Gabriel. And John Cena comes out, and you'll get John Cena's entrance because he's important, but then they'll cut to commercial, and when they come back from commercial, Justin Gabriel's in the ring, and he doesn't really get announced, right? And so that's the sort of standard way that I sort of grew up understanding. And Triple H is really fucking with my head with this, right? Because we start this show and you have your champion and the two challengers already in the ring, and then they get announced. So there's no music played. You don't really get to see them come out from the back on TV. And so it's really like when that happens, I was like, well, we don't get to see the entrances. And then I sat here and I was like, well, Triple H is changing the way we view this, right? He's testing this out. And I actually liked it where you sort of, you finish the intro to the show and the recap that leads to it, and then you immediately start with people in the ring. I think that's a cool shot. This was a fun match, guys. This triple threat for the women's title, Tatum Paxley, Lyra Valkyria, Roxanne Perez. What a fun show. What a fun show. What a fun match this was. And I got to tell you guys something. The first person on the rising stock for WeTooDeep stock market is Tatum Paxley. Let me just tell you, like, she used to be like background character, didn't really care about her. And she used to be like jobber, but she's put in some work. She's done what they asked her to do. And now she's getting this little push here. Now, I don't think it's going to pay off in like a title run or anything, but we were damn sure close to the point that, like, I already know Lyra's moving up. Like, I think Lyra gets drafted, personally. And I think Roxanne eventually may get drafted as well. And so to me, this match was really about how are we going to get Tatum Paxley over? And damn, did they do it. I think Tatum's over with the crowd. The crowd was really cheering for her. And she put on a damn good match. Right? And let me tell you, her stock is rising with this feud here. And it just goes to show that you could take someone who's losing every time they're in the ring. And if you book them the right way, fans will get behind them. Guys, I need to tell you this. Fans are dumb. A lot of people are stupid. That's just human nature. A lot of people will just do what you tell them to do. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? If you convince them that Tatum Paxley is important, the fans will start to cheer for her. That's just, hey, look, that's the secret of the industry. Not just in wrestling, but in music, in entertainment, and right? That's the secret of life. Most people, a large percentage of humanity, are just sheep. They follow whatever you tell them to do. There's a reason record executives don't really care what people put in their music, and they'll push the propaganda, and they'll push the drugs and the sex and all of that shit. And then people listen to it. Why? Because a lot of people just do what pop culture tells them to do. Wrestling fans are no different. They're dumb. A lot of the fan base is let me not say it that way. A lot of the fan base is stupid. They're sheep. So as the booker, you got to just treat them that way. And if you just book them to be strong, they're going to follow along. Because that's human nature. We want to be led. Not all of us, but most of us have no desire in breaking the status quo. Most of humanity. This is a deeper philosophical debate. Didn't think y'all were getting philosophy 101 here, right? But people are sheep. That's just how we act. That's just human nature. We go along with the status quo, right? And they've done studies on this where, like, there could be a fight that breaks out. And they've done these type of, like, experiments where they get, like, two actors and they do, like, a fight where it's like a man and a woman, right? And they go on, like, a busy street in, like, New York. And the man starts screaming at the woman and getting almost to the point of being physical with. I mean, they have a whole damn TV show called What Would You Do that breaks into this. right? And there are some people who get uncomfortable and do what needs to be done and do the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing is uncomfortable, right? And not following the status quo of what the culture and what the entertainment wants you to do. That's an uncomfortable place to be, right? Because everyone wants to be accepted. Everyone wants to be liked, right? So that's the fan base. Hey, guess what? Just book. Hey, take Omos, and I'm back on this train again. Take Omos, have him win the United States champion. Start having him go through the mid card. Tell him he's important. Guess what? Fans will fucking cheer for him. Because they're sheep. I hate to break that to you, but that's just the way it is. Tatum Paxley, though, has actual potential in this game, right? The next thing that really spoke, we had new Quarter Cats crew or whatever. I can't watch them without Gulak because it just annoys me that Gulak's not there, right? It was a good match against the family, and it's telling the story, and it's fun. It's fine. But just just seeing, I don't know, man. It is what it is. But the next big thing that really stood out to me was this first ever women's battleground match, and we had the contract signing. And again, I don't really give a fuck. Like I don't see what the big deal is about. Oh, like no one ever said that battleground was, or excuse me, underground was supposed to be like men only. Like, I don't understand what the big deal with this being promoted this way is. Again, we've already sort of had this conversation, but let me just tell you what this conversation did, or what this promo did for me. Guys, this is how Natalya should be used. She should be used at house shows because she has a fan base. She's loved in the fan base. But she shouldn't be in title shot. Like, there shouldn't be like Rhea Ripley calling out who's going to be my next opponent, and it's Natalya. That shouldn't be how you use Natalya, because that's where fans start to hate you. Natalya should be in NXT as the sort of get you over, get Carmen over, get Lola over, right? This is the role she's supposed to be in, because she's a serviceable wrestler. She should be at house shows, and she should be doing NXT just like this, training, working backstage with her husband as a producer. This is how Natalya should be used. Right? The next match that really was this beach brawl between Sol Ruca and Blair Davenport. And bro, this was a banger. This was better than I thought it was going to be. And my initial thought of this is, hey, I know we're having the women's North American champion, whatever shit they're doing with that in the future. They haven't really given us much detail on it, but Sol Ruca should be the champion. Just don't even have a tournament. Just give it to Sol Ruca. Give her the damn title. Just give it to Sol Ruca. The crowd's behind her. Her in-ring work is fan-fucking-tastic, dude. She's just one of those that get it. She has that it factor. Give it to Sol Ruca right now. And then the next big thing really is Trick versus Ilya. And they've been building the entire show around this, really just hyping the fuck out of this. Bringing as many main roster stars that they could that means something to NXT. The Creeds, Johnny, even right before the match, Ilya's coming out and Damian shows up. Right? And this match had emotion already in it. For those who have sort of followed the story, and there's a story here, right? Trick's the dog. And I hate to say this, and I really don't. I mean this with 100% sincerity. I stand on business on this. NXT is the best show in the world when it comes to the wrestling genre. Let me tell you why. The storylines, the presentation, the crowd, and the goddamn commentators. I'm sorry. If y'all hate on Vic Joseph and Booker T, this is the best comment. I love Michael Cole and I love Pat McAfee, but there's a little bit with me where Pat McAfee is so good at being what he is, but at times he's a little obnoxious with it because Pat has other obligations where he's not really in the business of wrestling, right? And Booker T, I think, does, Pat says crazy things, but so does Booker T. And I think Booker T plays that role better, just me personally. Like, I love Pat McAfee. But the Raw commentary booth to me, just at times, Pat says things that take away from. And he takes away from. And the one thing that I remember with, like, Pat McAfee is Royal Rumble. Not this year's Royal Rumble, but last year's Royal Rumble. I think they were in San Antonio, and they had Hardy, the producer, or the musician, the country musician. He was performing, and Pat was singing over Hardy, and it ruined the TV view, right? Because there were people in the arena who were like, "Oh, he sounds pretty good. This is a good performance." But the people who are watching on TV were like, this sucks. And why? Because Pat was singing over it. Pat doesn't really, he's so extreme at times. So for me, let me just explain what I mean by this. Like, Pat McAfee, to me, when Jey Uso comes out and Pat McAfee stands on the arena, on the table, and he's doing the hands up and down, like hyping up the crowd shit, that to me takes away from Jey Uso. It doesn't add to Jey Uso. It takes away. It takes the attention off of Jey Uso, in my opinion. When he comes out and he says, "Oh, we're just getting yeeted. I'm yeeting on everything." To me, that takes away from the product, in my opinion. It's cringy. I don't like it. Right? The best commentary booth in wrestling right now is Vic Joseph and Booker T. They have chemistry. They rib on each other all the time on the show, and it's fun. And as much as I haven't really liked, I'm upset that McKenzie was released from backstage and no longer with the company. Kelly Kincaid is growing on me a lot. And I just think NXT is the best product in the world right now. It just is. And I know everyone's like, well, it's not developmental. Y'all need to look at it for what it is. It's good TV. I'll say it. I'll live on this hill until something else gets better. It's the best 2-hour television wrestling show right now on the planet. It's the best 2 hours of wrestling on the planet every single week. Right? In this match, I mean, the way they presented this, man, this is a memory. So let's compare the brands. Trick Williams put in a right. So I told you about, there's a story leading up to, and a story of the match, the story leading up to the match, and the story of the match that takes place within the ropes. Well, the story leading up to is, Trick is 0-3 against Dragunov. If he loses, he leaves NXT. There's obstacles all around him. On the way to this match, he's had to go through 2 other harsh matches against Carmelo, right? And it seems like every opportunity Trick has, he loses, right? He's down and out. And then the match starts. And they book this the way that exactly how I would book it. The story in the match, of the match itself. The story within the ropes. Well, Trick goes fast. He's trying to end it quickly. And he's trying to go toe-to-toe. And Dragunov is beating him. and he's beating him, and he's beating him. And hope seems, and like you could physically feel it in the arena, hope seems, oh man, Dragunov's going to beat him again. And you could start to feel this angst in the arena. Trick's gone. Right? And then he starts to get that second wind, and the crowd's getting behind him again. And they're just telling cinema, right? This is perfect storytelling. But just as, that hope arises in the crowd again, well, Dragunov snuffs it out like he has been in the past. Moscow. Is it Moscow Mule? Is that the name of the move? I don't actually know. He hits it from a normal one, or H-bomb. It's an H-bomb. Excuse me. It's the H-bomb. Hits the first one like he normally does from the canvas. And then he hits one from the second rope. Then he goes all the way up and he hits one from the top rope. And Trick's kicking out. So they're in the corner and they're building this tension. Who's going to hit the finisher first? I think it's the Moscow Mule is what Dragunov was going, and then Trick shot is what Trick's move is, right? And Trick hits the Trick shot. And then it's a 1, 2, 3. And Trick Willy is your new NXT World Champion. And I'm going to say a statement. This is a hot take right here. And I know it. It's going to be critiqued all day long. I know it. But take all of the major promotions. AEW, which includes ROH. They're not separate brands. They're the same company. Take AEW, ROH, New Japan, TNA, main roster, WWE, NXT. Right? Take all of them. And you line up all the champions in all of those companies. Name me a better champion with a better character, with a better crowd reaction than Trick Williams. I think Trick Williams is the best champion in wrestling right now. Better than Damian, better than Cody, better than Swerve. And if we're comparing the brands, which moment are you going to remember more? Are you going to remember Swerve Strickland beating Samoa Joe with no storyline behind it as to why it matters? Or are you going to remember the day where Trick Williams conquered all the odds with this giant story behind him and he became NXT champion? In the span of the last week, the most important title change is Trick Williams. And I believe Trick Williams is the best champion currently in wrestling. He has better reaction, right? Because Trick Williams, to me, he got over against someone the crowd actually enjoyed watching, in Carmelo and in Dragunov. Like, there wasn't hate for them. Like, because Dragunov isn't your traditional heel. There's nuance to who Dragunov is, right? Dragunov is sort of like respect the culture of wrestling, respect the path, right? Respect wrestling, and Dragunov could play the face or the heel. He's sort of that tweener. He really didn't have a right, and I wish more characters were that way. He's similar to Gunther in that regard. Right? And Trick was well over before Carmelo became the heel in the feud. Trick Williams got over by himself. Cody got over, and this is just my opinion, and I think this is factual. Cody was only as beloved as he was because his opponent was Roman Reigns. And had Roman Reigns not been the opponent, no one would really care if Cody won the title or not. Trick Williams means more as champion. He gets the pure fan reaction, where fans just love him because he's Trick Williams, right? Fans love Cody because he's the guy that beat Roman. But give it 6 months, right? Give Trick a 6-month run and people will still be doing the same reaction. Will people really be cheering for Cody in 6 months? Or are we going to be asking for a new champion? Right? Trick Williams is the best champion currently in wrestling. Name me a champion that's better. So with that, Kayfabe is on my rising stock. Tatum Paxley is on my rising stock. Ruca is on my rising stock. And then the last thing I'll say is I used to believe, over the last few weeks, I've been trying to convince you that Will Ospreay was the best wrestler on the planet. And coming into this episode, prior to watching it, had I not watched NXT prior to recording this would have been a completely different episode. Right? Coming in before I watched NXT, I was going to sit here again and tell you that Will Ospreay is the best wrestler on the planet. And then I watched Ilya Dragunov have a match against Trick Williams. And I believe that Ilya Dragunov is the best wrestler on the planet. Will Ospreay's number 2. Ilya Dragunov can put on just as good matches as Will Ospreay, and he doesn't need to drop people on his neck. He's better on the mic, in my opinion. I like work ethic. He has a work ethic he's going to be a star in this company. His character's actually a character. There's some development there. Even to the point to where, like, he lost the title, he took it from the ref so that he could hand it over because he respects the fight, right? Like, I don't know. Will Ospreay's great, and he can do that flippy fast style, but Dragunov tells stories in the ring. Dragunov puts on bangers every time he gets in the ring from his ring psychology, not because he's an acrobat, but because of his ring psychology. His style of wrestling is just so good. He's the best wrestler on the planet. He can tell stories. He could do really, really good matches. Ilya Dragunov is that dude. With that being said, tune in to the WWE draft tonight if you're going to watch it. I'll be keeping up with it, but I probably won't be watching SmackDown Live. I'm more of an NFL fan, so I'll probably be watching night 2 of the NFL draft. But with that being said, thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for listening if you're listening on podcast networks. And again, QR code as well as the links in the descriptions. Go get you some merch, some titles, some t-shirts, whatever you want. Use the link if you're, if you're shopping for a gift for someone or just, treating yourself. Use that link in the description or on the QR code as well. Join the Discord. Send questions to WeTooDeep at junkyardmediagroup.com. And again, I appreciate every single one of y'all who listens and watches. Like, share, subscribe, share it with all your friends, share it on social media. Y'all have, if y'all want to clip the damn show, y'all have full permission to clip it. I'm not gonna get upset. The only thing that I will say is, don't clip the intro or the outro, because first off, that's kind of a bad thing to share on social media to convince people to watch. But second, it's also copyrighted. And so I don't need y'all getting the strikes. But if y'all want to, clip the episode and share it with your friends and be like, hey, look at this, you should listen to this show, I'm all for it. Link them, the link, share them, share it on social media. use the hashtag SMWP, Slap and Meat Wrestling Podcast. And again, thank y'all for listening. I'm WeTooDeep, and I will see y'all next Tuesday when I bring Wavy D back on, and we are probably going to discuss the draft and that shakeup and other news that happens in that time period. But until then, y'all have a great weekend, and I'll see y'all on Tuesday.
Brother, I'm going run a wild Hulk Hogan. If I like it's a moment.